Hi everyone, and welcome to this online master thesis defense on how to do a virtual spatial experience to understand the states of painting, followed by a VR device named Invisible. During the conception of this thesis and the associated research device, we noticed that many VR experiments around painting were promoted without the VR medium taking over the question of representation of pictorial spaces in this new form of perception. And the dissertation I will now defend based on VR mediation device developed on occasion 6 to highlight the relationship of the painting to the spaces of the museum, or how to make a virtual spatial experience to understand the stakes of painting. The research behind this thesis is based on Mort de Didon, which is an oil on canvas made by Mattia Preti around the 17th century, on which we have based this study by augmenting it with a VR mediation device named Invisible. This painting is part of a duo of pendants with Judith tenant la tête de l'Oferme, two works that returned in September to the collections of the Museum of Fine Arts of Chambéry after 2 years of restoration. The work depicts the suicide of Dido, queen and founder of Carthage, dying at the stake, surrounded by her retinue. In order to study this painting and to experiment with its pictorial space, we have developed an indirect VR mediation device. The Invisible device was developed and experimented in collaboration with the mediators of the public service and the collection pool of the Museum of Fine Arts of Chambéry, using the basis of a mixed reality experience developed during the 2019 workshop of the Information Communication and Hypermedia Department of University Savoie-Mont-Blanc with the museum. The new version of Invisible is designed to bring the visitor into the deconstruction of the museum space set up in the previous VR device. He wanders through a dark space surveyed from the building's construction line, finding himself facing the frame of the painting. In contact with the material that has become an interface, the user participates in the creation of the image by altering the space in which he or she represents. The image then constitutes a space that absorbs us, that we want to penetrate imaginatively. Thus, the spectator in this device will transform the surrounding space. Some spaces will make it possible to question the very place of the user in the center of the device, making him cross the painting so that he reaches another space. The project focuses on a questioning around the notion of interface between opaque screen and opening onto an elsewhere. In Invisible, the user is led to experience a particular screen that is the painting, whose interest will be precisely to question this tension between the dynamics of opening onto an elsewhere and the dynamic of closing, between flatness and depth, between controlled and undefined space, which are constantly at play within the spaces of the painting and the VR device. Thus, we navigate in the device thanks to the contact of our avatar, transforming the space of the virtual painting, sometimes activating divine light, illuminating the flesh, and thus highlighting Mattia Preti's staging during the elaboration of the painting. As the development of the device and the research went further, we have seen many similarities in the way of perceiving and experimenting the spaces of a painting and the spaces of VR devices. So to experiment the spaces set up by the digitization of a VR painting is to try to feel and understand the spaces of painting. Indeed, we were able to highlight the development of the grid structuring the painting toward an immersive 3D grid in VR, generating a deepening of the painting as well as a stretching of its spaces, revealing immersive spaces in between. These spaces will have become experimental, reveal the stratification of the various layers of paint, space and time in the painting, transforming the experience and discovery of the work as the space, once flat, become multicolor and evolving. The passage from painting to a virtual reality allows a renewal of its dynamic. VR will then allow passages, vertical crossing in these different layers, revealing the complexity of the deep plane that is the painting. The device makes it possible to highlight the reversal of the work that takes place with the transitions to painting on canvas. The image, through its digitization, has become reversible, showing as much as it hides, in what Stephanie Katz calls a two-sided image, known as one that resists all appropriation and opens up to multiple imaginations. The first step in the invisible device is to pass the frame. Once it's done, the spectator finds itself swallowed up by its space of representation. The user is evolving through the painting in VR by moving through the space with a fingertip on the canvas. The user exposes the tooling of the display device used as an underlay in the canvas through the simulated bodily interaction, making the body a disturbing element of the space on stage. This exploration in virtual reality allows the questioning of the autonomous squared proposed space in the image of the geometrization of the world by 3D and VR softwares. The spectator finds himself nested in a space of representation, itself nested in a space of interaction, nested in a Euclidean space formed by the technology employed, thus taking up the spatial logic represented in the exhibition space of the current painting. The relationship between the various elements composing the landscape, the various layers of reference, reading, space, and so on, now develop in depth on a vertical axis, nested in the painting as an organized space, as a mappable site. What we call a deep plane, which we will refer as an horizontal network, which the spaces in between dig, stretch, and dilate, generating new relationships and constantly restructuring the architecture of the nested spaces. Evolving in the device, the user is constantly moving back and forward through the spaces. These piercings of the canvas occurs through the composition between the lines of the grid. The intergrid spaces juxtapose and crosses by connecting all the important elements chosen by the artist in the painting and stretched by VR. This intermeshing is softened by the physically tested VR device, allowing the breakthrough towards the space of in-between, mixed between screen and subject. The interaction close to the canvas is leading to the tilting of spaces, forming places, nodes of connection, placing the user between the interior and exterior of the painting in the meshes thus formed by the superposition of all the planes of the painting. The device pushes the user to transit between the different strata of spaces fluctuating through the work, each of which has a certain temporality in order to experience the device that is the work. The interspace being also an in-between implies the time necessary for the spectator to pass from one place to another, and sometimes crossing many. Thus, the logic of the work's interlocking sets up a tested time by the user in the course of the experience, twisted in the course of the revelations of the strata of the pictorial device. The device of the painting nested in the museums, coupled with the invisible device and the experience of territories with asynchronous temporalities from a set of interwoven spaces corresponding to what Marc Vera calls e-spaces. By the interaction with those e-spaces is making those places visible on the painting, as it's distorting the space. For example, when you touch some part of the paintings, it creates some light or generates degenerating voxels. Those voxels open on a fractal logic specific to VR places in those devices, as the own matter of the image is revealing the dynamic of the two-sided image, showing as much as it's occur. And this dynamics is doubled by the own dynamic of the screen as an interface of the device. Once the user went from one side of the painting to the other, he is facing the back of the canvas and can manipulate the bodies of characters in the painting. But when he does so, he is recomposing the painting itself, and so the algorithm is evolving. When he is replacing the characters, they are floating. With perspective techniques, the painting is developing a false depth, leading to the creation of non-figured spaces necessary for the coherence of the simulation and which are present despite their physical non-existence in the painting. In order to question those spaces, the canvas sinks to the touch. The interactivity of virtual reality allows the experience of painting to be transformed from a sensitive and readable vision to a physical sensation of the artwork. For example, in Mort de Didon, the space between the buyer and the page is only suggested. It could contain other characters, relief, or emptiness that we would have no idea. The hollow left by the stretching of the perspective develops spaces of uncertainty full of emptiness, like the painting of Lucio Fontana. The spaces generated by this detachment are floating, intermediate and without perspective. However, they invade and mingle with all the surrounding spaces. The spaces out of the hollow, according to the perspective, are intended to extend the space of the spectator in order to immerse him in the work, thus making the image an interface between reality and representation. As we said, in Invisible, the only avatar the user can see is his hands. And this hypothetically avatar is thus only the interfaced perception of the retranscription of user interaction on the machine and the feedback of the program on the user. The body provides the traces of its movement captured by the program in order to be transcribed and given to be seen. The VR helmet then becomes a translator of a body and gesture split and mimed in a digital space. The user of the invisible device, thinking is observing and having a causality on a digitization of Mort de Didon, and his pictorial body constantly comes up against the structuring plane of the screen, separating him from the moving scene of the flow, forcing him to become himself a part of the representation through a mathematic captation of his movement by the algorithm. Both the body and the painting, following a dynamic of trace, becomes a mobile data. The referent, and we have to understand the image, of the painting and of the user's body are exploded during the digitization. Each pixel is its own space, invisible to the benefit of a common fractal space of the screen resulting from the connection to neighboring pixels. The screen of the unique pixel shelters a fractal logic where the whole is found in unity, while stretching. In short, a logic where space nests itself from the docile pixel, and where each fragment of the painting contains the figurative potential of the whole painting. The user, faced with this multiple screen, sees his gaze exploded by the division of space into individual and ever-moving pixels. Once again, I'd like to thank my jury and every viewer of this online thesis defense. I would also like to, I also would like to thank every people that helped me, from my co-workers in the museum department to my friends who supported me, and say a special thanks to the pedagogic equip of the department and the USMB members.